Chapter 91. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Reaper Scans Chapter 91. A Monster Among Us, Part 4, TL. Osaka, PR, Ash. The moon was hidden behind the thunderclouds that night, and a loud crack of thunder later, rain fell. Roy felt the raindrops falling on his hand, and then he pulled his arm back. It's raining. And then, as if on cue, the tents and carriages were buffeted by the rain. The raindrops sounded like loud drums, and the northern gale blew at the tents, threatening to uproot them at any moment. Then things got worse. There's a situation. Roy went out into the rain, and Letho followed. Their shirts were drenched in an instant, but they didn't have time for that. One of the troop members was screaming in the distance, but his voice was almost drowned out by the rain. The duo quickly went to him. What happened? A monster attacked us. The man was breathing heavily, his face pale, but he managed to hold Letho's hands. You have to help us, Letho. You're the only one who can do it. He was shivering uncontrollably, obviously shaken to his core. Where's everyone? Evelyn, Cantilla, and the other guys went after it. They were headed to the swamp. That they told me to hold the fort. Roy looked into the distance, but the rain and darkness was stopping even him. He could only see 20 feet ahead of him, so going after them in these conditions would prove unwise. Calm down. Letho calmed the troop member with Axii. The rain started not long ago. Did you manage to see the monster? What did it look like? It was too dark, so I didn't see it clearly, but its eyes looked feral, like a cat's. Or a wolf's. And they gleamed. I see. Where'd Alan go, then? The man frowned. I didn't see Alan, but I saw Art and Ari flying east. We'll be back soon, so stay here and don't go anywhere, Letho said. I'm counting on you guys. The duo strode into the darkness, their boots squelching against the ground. Letho was carrying GWIHYR, while Roy was holding his crossbow. Neither of them had a torch, for the moonlight was enough light for them to go on. Is he out of his mind? Roy was frustrated. Why'd he pull this stunt on a night like this? I thought he was supposed to be the troop's guardian. What if his members got hurt? Letho replied calmly, he must have realized we found him out earlier. This is just a trap. And we're walking right into it. He'll come for us if we don't. And he won't be friendly. We should take the bait and see what he's up to. They went ahead, crouching and hiding in the rain. A short while later, they saw the flicker of a torch ahead, and they heard the voices of the members who'd gone after the monster. Right when they were about to rendezvous with the troop members, an owl appeared before them. It cooed for a moment before perching itself on Roy's shoulder. Its wings were wet from the rain, so it couldn't fly well. It raised its fat wings and pointed to the left. This is Alan's owl, Ari. Is she giving us directions? Ari heard Roy's mumble and nodded at him with an uncanny show of human intelligence. Then she opened her wings and stood up to bow at them, much to Roy's surprise. Is she bowing to us? You're such a lady, Ari. Ari covered her face with her wings sheepishly. Whoa, she understands human language. Alan's more complicated than I thought. Roy eased up a bit, since Ari was trying to be friends with them. They followed her directions for about 10 minutes before arriving at a mini pine forest. The rain was blocked out by the dense foliage, and a boulder that stood at 5 feet sat at the end of the winding path. There, a towering figure Saturday. Roy cast observe on it from a long distance away, but it wasn't the same data he got a few days ago. So this is Observe's weakness. It can't see through a shapeshifter. No, a cursed one. Alan age. 30. 3 years old status. Sea Scorpion Troop Master, he is the founder of Sea Scorpion Troop. A proactive and charismatic man loved and respected by his troop members. Sparrow Whisperer, after an unexpected mutation, Alan possessed the ability to communicate with his pets. The falcon, Art, and the owl, Ari. Thanks to that, he rose to fame in the show industry. You have uncovered his hidden identity thanks to the investigation. Cursed one, he is afflicted by a terrible curse. Alan will become a werewolf on the night of the full moon and some specific nights. The slaughter begins. According to the legends, werewolves possess the evil and cruelty present in both humans and beasts, but Alan seems to be immune to that. While most werewolves are nothing but mindless killing machines, Alan's mind stays intact. HP requires higher perception, strength. 13, Werform plus 5, dexterity. 15, Werform plus 5, constitution. Requires higher perception, perception. 15, Feral instinct plus 5, will. 6 charisma. 4, Werform.2, spirit. 5 skills. Werform, passive. Half man, half wolf. All killer. Werewolves are the kings of darkness. Plus 5 to strength and dexterity, but .2 to charisma because of its grotesque looks and body odor. Feral instinct, passive. A primal instinct embedded in its genes. Grants werewolves incredible perception. Werewolves can detect murderous intent and its enemies' weaknesses. They can sense danger almost perfectly, giving them more time to dodge attacks. Speedy regeneration, passive. Its cursed flesh has incredible regeneration speed and can heal minor injuries instantly. Can consume enemy flesh to heal medium injuries and recover some HP plus 10 to constitution. Feral howl level 5. It can summon wolves or werewolves in its vicinity for help through a special howl. It's superior to me in close combat, but Letho's better. Roy gripped his crossbow tightly as he estimated the number of shots he could fire before Alan could come near. 2, maybe. So, are you Alan? Or are you a werewolf? Why did you call us here? The silhouette leaped down from the boulder. The moon shone on its fangs and exposed gum as it tried to grin, but all it managed was a sneer. The snout was getting in the way. Good. Seems like you guys aren't idiots who kill monsters the first chance they get. Let's talk. Its voice was guttural and deep, and it wasn't attractive at all, especially not when it was inching closer to the duo, its body towering over them, its big claws shining coldly under the moonlight. Ari cooed happily and flew toward Alan. Join our Discord to chat about the series and get notified when a new chapter gets released. Chapter 92. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Reaper Scans Chapter 92. A Monster Among Us, Part 5, TL. Osaka, PR, Ash, the rain became heavier, penetrating even the dense foliage, wetting the werewolf's fur. It slowly stalked toward them, the ground squelching under its feet. Alright, that's enough. You can talk from that spot. The werewolf stopped 30 feet away with its arms crossed. It stared at the duo, its eyes wide. Ari and Art were standing on his shoulder, rubbing against its furry face. Why did you ask us out at this hour? Roy was aiming at the cursed one. I mean you no harm, so don't pull that trigger. I don't mind you hurting me, but if these two get shot, this talk will be over. Oh, trust me when I say I shoot well. They won't get hurt. Not one bit. Very well, then. The werewolf looked at Letho, though Letho was just observing it in silence. You realized what I was when we were in the valley, didn't you? Yes. We thought you were in Shire, but we never expected you to be in the caravan with us. The werewolf stared down and let out a sigh. I knew those bastards would be trouble. Then it looked up at the duo with pleading eyes. But I had no choice. The troop is my home, and the members are my family. I can't let them get hurt, so I got rid of the source of the problem. It licked its claws. Do you think I was wrong? No, Letho answered. They were just bandits anyway. Probably killed more than a couple of humans. They weren't innocent. I would have done the same if you hadn't done it first. The werewolf chuckled. I knew you'd understand. Your kind does the same thing, right? Letho didn't answer, though his silence was an answer in itself. He was already 80, after all. There must have been blood on his hands, and some of it had to belong to innocence. Killing some bandits would be a piece of cake for him. The werewolf knew it had hit the spot, so it continued. I might have turned into a monster, but as you can see, my mind is still my own, and I've never killed any innocent people. Its voice started trembling. But are you going to kill me anyway? Roy thought about it for a moment and stared back into Alan's eyes. We aren't saints, and you aren't a mindless monster. We wouldn't even have come if you hadn't lured us in. We'll just keep this up until we get to Elander, and that's it. Can you keep this a secret, then? Alan put his hands together in a prayer, though it looked funny. The members are my family, but they're just human. Most can't accept werewolves, so please keep this a secret from them. How would you know if you don't talk it out? Roy eased up and put his weapon down. He couldn't bring himself to hate the cursed one who was pleading for the sake of his friends. But sooner or later, the cat's gonna get out of the bag. You can't hide it forever. Just keep it a secret until then. Besides, we've been working together for years. Some of them know something's up, but they never expose me. Alan looked crestfallen, so his birds pecked at him to cheer him up. Why do you trust us? Letho suddenly asked. Alan made his best attempt to frown, and then he smiled bitterly. I tried to ask witchers and sorcerers for help after turning into this, but they either ended up trying to kill me or making me an experimental subject. No one would help. The two of you look like level-headed, reasonable people, and you heard me out. I figured I could take this bet. Yeah, he's just out of options, Roy thought. How did you become a werewolf then? And those birds of yours used to be humans, right? Alan paused for a moment to think about if he should tell the duo about his past, but finally, he resolved himself to do it. This is the cult of the Lionhead Spider's doing. Alan paced back and forth in frustration, recalling a painful memory. This is a curse from that cult's priestess. I turned into a werewolf, my children became birds, but my wife had it the worst. She became a frog. Oh, okay. Roy wasn't sure how to process that. The Frog Prince reversed. Man, I know he's complex, but that's out there, even for us. Roy had read about the cult of the Lionhead Spider though. It was one of the many evil cults on the continent. They'd sacrifice live people to appease their cruel god. Their emblem was a lionhead spider on a web, and their priestesses all possessed powerful curses. I see. No wonder Evelyn said you were searching for your true love. It's because you guys are cursed. I'm not exactly a smart guy, and I can't ask anyone for help, he said. But I found some inspiration from fairy tales. They say true love can break all curses. I think the curse can be lifted if I find someone who loves me and my kids. Roy was surprised that Evelyn hadn't been making things up. So he's actually searching for true love. What about your actual wife, then? Poor Sheena. She left us 3 years ago. Couldn't take it anymore. That memory brought nothing but pain. The gleam in his eyes was snuffed out, and his snout hung open. Art and Ari started cawing and cooing too, as if trying to mourn. Roy knew he shouldn't laugh, but it looked amusing and sad at the same time. He asked Letho, "Can you help him?" Letho was surprised, though he turned to Alan. Killing monsters isn't all a witcher can do. We know how to lift curses too, though only to an extent. We might be of some help if you would tell us your story in detail. Is that true? You can lift the curse, Letho. No guarantees, but I can probably point you in the right direction. Join our Discord to chat about the series and get notified when a new chapter gets released. Chapter 93. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Reaper Scans Chapter 93. A Monster Among Us, Final Part, TL. Osaka, PR. Alan looked up at the moon that was almost hidden behind the leaves. The rain almost muffled his voice, but the duo could hear him perfectly. I'm Alan, a farmer's kid from Rivendell. Most of my friends were farmers' kids too, but Sheena was an exception. She was a clerk's daughter. She was educated, kind, gentle, and had hair as beautiful as iris flowers. And she had a smile cuter than anything else in the world. He paused for a moment. If it weren't because of that one incident, someone like her never would have come across someone like me. She probably would have married the mayor's son or a noble's child. She could have lived a wealthy life, but fate decided to throw something at her. That something was me. It was back when she was 17. Sheena was on a trip, and she fell into the Nui Star. I jumped in to save her despite knowing the danger. We'd fallen in love the moment our eyes had met, and we started meeting in secret. Alan's eyes were starting to smile as he reminisced about the good old days. Even his fangs gleamed happily, as if they too were in love. The children felt their father's happiness too, so they swayed. A peasant and a clerk's daughter. Unthinkable, but that was what fate wanted. We dated in secret for a year, and then Sheena got pregnant with the twins. PR/N. The Nui is a river. Hey, wait, Roy interrupted, much to Alan's surprise and annoyance. So Sheena was pregnant when she was 18. How old were you then? 20.8 and still pathetically single. Alan stared down and grinned sheepishly. A 20.8-year-old peasant and an 18-year-old daughter of a clerk. Did the two of them even have any mutual topics to talk about? Roy needed some time to process that, and he was shaken when reality hit him. He wanted to say something, but decided against it. Alright, you lucky guy. Looks like fate does have some plans in store for you. Yes. I was fortunate that Sheena fell for me. Of course, we couldn't hide her pregnancy forever, so we eloped. Or else her family would have probably disowned her, and the whole town would have called her all sorts of names. We'd left one night and escaped into the great forest. He clenched his paws and looked down again. But I was a useless man. I didn't prepare enough for the trip. We got lost in the forest, and when we were about to run out of supplies, you met her. That priestess, Roy interrupted. Alan nodded solemnly. Rachel saved us. Took us to a rundown temple and took care of my wife until her delivery. I need to confirm one thing. Letho frowned, looking serious as well. Did she ask for anything before she helped the two of you? Something like a reward? No, Alan replied adamantly, but the duo realized he sounded sadder than before. After my wife's delivery, Rachel held Ari for a while. Then she said the unthinkable. Alan's voice was starting to get hoarse, and his face contorted with rage. That bitch wanted our daughter. Ari was just an infant, but she wanted to take her away before Sheena could even see her. Can you imagine how hard it was for us? Alan roared at them. Roy took an involuntary step back and aimed his crossbow at Alan by reflex. She wanted Ari to stay with her in that dark, humid, putrid place and inherit her legacy. Rachel wanted her to become a hack. A servant for that disgusting spider. I would have said yes if she wanted me as her servant, but she wanted my child. Alan's eyes gleamed crimson. Naturally, I refused her, he said coldly. He had a faraway look in his eyes, as if screaming at something that wasn't there. We'd convalesced at the temple for a while until Sheena had felt better. The bitch noticed us when we were about to take Ari away, and then she started making those gestures. I was reminded of the witches in children's stories and realized she must have been cursing us. Scared out of my wits, I got a knife and plunged it in her belly. Alan tensed up. Not even the rain could muffle his heavy breathing and pounding heart. A long, long while later, Alan fell dead silent. We hid in the temple, waiting for Rachel to bleed to death, and then we saw the weird signs she'd drawn on the ground using her blood. That marked the start of our nightmares. He sighed. But the curse isn't all bad. At least I'm free of any and all disease, and I never tire. Also, the whole family became telepathic, so we can communicate freely. Made hunting and caring for them easier. And I started a traveling circus to take them on a trip around the world. But Sheena couldn't take it. She hated slimy stuff like frogs when she was alive. She held on for 2 years, but eventually, she succumbed to the curse. I was practically a one-man show back then, so I thought I should just disband the troupe, but my kids were why I kept going. I had to do this. To find a way to lift the curse. Then I stumbled upon the way to get rid of it, and as you know, it's true love. I thought it only existed in fairy tales, but nay. I didn't lie to my members, since that was my goal. I sought professional help, and I realized I might be one woman's kiss away from lifting this curse. I worked hard to fall for another woman, but I couldn't do it, no matter what. That's why I was never blessed with true love. And my kids have been cursed for 5 years. Do you still love your wife, then? Letho asked. Of course. I would like to see her right now, but, Alan looked at his children. I can't leave my children alone. As you should. Sheena gave you 2 beautiful children and shared your curse. Rachel was only targeting you, but because you and your family were bonded tightly by fate and bloodline, they shared your curse without knowing it. Thanks to that, you retained your sanity despite getting turned into a werewolf. Oh, and one more thing. Letho arched his eyebrow. You lied to us. The lionhead spider's goddess might be evil, but her priestesses follow the ancient laws nonetheless. There's a condition if she wants your child to be the temple's heir, and that condition is to entwine your daughter's fate with hers. Most priests use the law of surprise for that. The law of surprise was an unwritten law that had binding effects, even if the contract was only oral. It was as old as human existence itself. The gist of it was that a person could request something from the person they saved. Most of the time, it was something like the first thing the person saw when they got home, or something they possessed but had no idea about. Many witchers got their disciples using that rule. So here's my guess. Rachel did ask for something. And that something goes along the lines of, if Sheena gives birth to a girl, then she must stay in the temple, but if they're both boys, then all of you may leave. That element of uncertainty is how the law of surprise takes root. Letho looked into its eyes before going closer to him. The 2 of you agreed to it before the delivery. Letho was sure about it. That didn't happen after the birth. You lied. Threatening you after the birth would be pointless, since it wouldn't create a binding contract, nor would it be magical. Letho's eyes gleamed furiously. You breached the contract first, didn't you? And you had the nerve to say you didn't take any innocent lives. Roy looked at Letho with shock, then turned his attention to Alan. Instead of refuting the claims, he kept his silence. Just when the duo was about to lose their patience, Alan took one step forward, his body trembling, his eyes filled with an unspoken plea. You're right. I breached the contract and turned my back on the priestess, so this is my punishment. It's supposed to be mine alone. He held his head in agony. I can live a long life, since werewolves are healthy, and Art can live for a few decades, since he's a falcon, but not Ari. It's been 5 years since then. She only has a year or 2 at best. Please save them, Letho. The children are innocent. Letho crossed his arms as he gazed straight into Alan's eyes, and Alan met his gaze. You're right. Letho sighed. This is entirely your fault, not the children's. They shouldn't suffer with you. He relented. But answer me. Do you love them more than you love yourself? Be honest. This is crucial. They're my only family and the reason I keep going on. I understand. Letho nodded. I can't save them, but you can, he declared. What do you mean? They weren't making things up when they said true love can lift curses. The countless tragic love stories recorded in history prove it. You're on the right track, but you're doing it wrong. Ari will be dead before you find that true love of yours. Consider this. You're the person who loves them the most, and family love is a form of love too. There is no need to find someone else to fill that role. I don't understand. Alan was confused. I love them more than I do myself, and they never leave my side. Even so, they're still cursed. Every fairy tale has its own little nugget of truth in it. You can find unimaginable power in love and blood, Roy interrupted. He was reminded of Gerald's story. One that was uncannily similar to Alan's, and he knew what Alan had to do to lift the curse. Now that we're certain you love your children deeply, we're one step away from lifting the curse. All we need now is blood. Blood combined with true love can end all curses and misfortune. Be specific. What should I do? Alan was in a hurry. Roy looked at Alan's kids, then opened his mouth, but said nothing. They're just kids, so we'd better take this somewhere they can't hear us, Letho said. He glanced at Roy furtively, wondering why Roy would know the way to lift the curse. Alan had a bad feeling about it, but he told his kids to stay on a tree not far from him. They can't actually understand things that are too complex though. Alan combed his fur with trembling paws to calm his nerves, but what he heard next made his mind go blank. You're the main target of the curse, so most of it will disappear when you die, and the blood taken right before that will be enough to lift the rest of it, Roy explained. This is the only way your kids can get rid of that curse and live their lives normally, Letho said somberly. You'll have to prove your love to them by using your very life. Alan stared down in silence for the longest time. He pondered on the matter, struggling to make a decision, but in the end, he resolved himself. If that's the truth, then I shall pray for your good fortune once this is all done, but if not, I shall curse you with every ounce of my being, just like how Rachel did to me and my family once. On the name of the Viper School, Letho, swear that everything I have told you about the way to lift the curse is true. If I break this promise, I shall never see the day the Viper School makes its return. Letho raised his necklace solemnly. On the name of the Viper School, Roy, swear that everything I have told you about the way to lift the curse is true. If I break this promise, Roy made a promise of his own. Alan gazed at them for the longest time, and then he let out a sigh. I have one final request. Can you send me off? I can't do it. Even taking my heart out won't kill me. You must cut my head off. I can't ask my family to do it. It's too cruel. Are you sure, Alan? Roy stared back at him. Are you sure you want to do this? His voice started trembling. Yes. Alan looked up with relief on his face. Then, he tilted his head and smiled as warmly as he could. I told you I loved them more than I do myself, and I wanted to see Sheena as soon as possible. Don't you want to say goodbye to your troop? Tell them what happened. They've been working with you for years. They have the right to know the truth, Letho reminded him. No last goodbyes. No. I don't know if anyone else has found out about this, but I know Evelyn has noticed something wrong about me, but I need you to bring my message to them. Alan told them about the next captain of the troop, what to do about his children, and how to deal with his funeral. I've been tortured this whole time. Every time I see my children trapped in a beast's body, every time I think about the night Rachel died, every time I remember about my wife's passing, I feel this pain in my chest. It's suffocating. It's time. It's time to free my children from the curse and atone for my sins with my blood. Only then do I have the right to see Sheena again. The long downpour finally ended, the dark clouds splitting apart, revealing the moon in all its splendor. The young man raised GWIHYR high in the sky and looked at a place not far from him. There, a menacing silhouette was kneeling on one knee, whispering to a pair of adorable birds. His eyes were filled with love and longing, but he knew what had to be done. Remember the game we always play, Art, Ari. Right, here goes. He took a deep breath. Close your eyes now. Turn around and count from 10. Come and find me whenever you're done. The one who finds me first gets a bedtime story from Daddy tonight. Don't peep, Art. Don't peep, you hear me? Don't peep. Alan's final message resounded in the air for a while, but eventually, everything fell silent, his last smile etched on his face. Join our Discord to chat about the series and get notified when a new chapter gets released. Chapter 94. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Reaper Scans Chapter 94. Cleanup, TL. Asuka, PR, Ash, Roy and Letho came out of the forest with a pair of naked children in their arms. The children were drenched in blood, and their faces were drained of all color. They were curled up in the duo's arms, but their eyelids kept trembling, as if they were having a nightmare. The children fainted the moment Alan's blood was splattered across their backs, so they hadn't seen the moment their father was decapitated. That was one silver lining in the tragedy, perhaps. We have a child of the sun here. If only we knew how to make the antidote. Alan wouldn't have had to die. Don't think too much about it. That was his fate. He reneged on his promise, so he was punished with death. Letho looked calm about it, as if he were talking about lunch. Roy agreed with him, but he still felt sad when he saw the latest record in his character sheet. You killed a cursed one, Alan the werewolf. EXP plus 200. Level 4 Witcher, 800/2000, . The EXP he got didn't sit well with him. He was conflicted about it. Alan wasn't innocent, since he did go back on his promise and repaid Rachel's help with betrayal, but at the same time, he truly loved his children and was a good father. Don't feel sad, boy. He chose salvation. Letho sighed. And you should have noticed he'd wanted to die for a while. Most of the search team had come back to the caravan. They were covered in blood, especially Cantilla. She was caressing her blade languidly, looking as satisfied as a beast who'd just feasted on its prey. When the duo came back, everyone was surprised about the kids they were holding. The women quickly cleaned them up and covered them with blankets. Then they warmed the kids up near the bonfire. We killed some drowners in the swamp, but no signs of Alan anywhere. What happened, Letho? Where did these kids come from? The duo looked at each other. They debated about it on the way back, but in the end, they decided to do as Alan had told them to, even if that'd draw some flack. This is what really happened, but please brace yourselves for it. The troop members received the news differently. Some thought the duo murdered Alan, some started fearing for themselves at the mention of curses, cults, and werewolves, while some slowly accepted the story after the initial shock. Fortunately, the main troop members chose to believe the duo. They'd noticed Alan's weird actions over the years, though they'd never confronted him about it. I always thought Art and Ari were too close to Alan. Their collaboration was seamless. I see, so they're his kids, the only proof of his existence. Alan was a good father, but he worried too much. We've been friends for years now. He could have told us about it. He probably didn't want us to feel sad about it. Alan's always been that way. He puts everyone else first. His nightly hunts with Ari were also his way of keeping us safe. Cantilla gritted her teeth and sighed. So what if he's a monster? Zerrikanians don't care about that as long as they're our friends. Then Amos suddenly spoke up. Alan had been acting weird, but he never harmed the troop. He was a great captain, but I don't trust the Witcher. He glared at the duo. Witchers are cold-blooded animals who would kill any monster they come across. I don't believe you'd actually help Alan if he were a werewolf. You must have lied to him and killed him when his guard was down. We killed him because he wanted to free his children. Letho threw him a cold look. He saved his soul and his children by giving up his own life. You know, I knew something was wrong with you here ever since I played Gwent with you. Roy pointed at his head. You say this is just a story we're making up to cover our murder, but what about the kids? We aren't gods. We can't just snap our fingers and make them appear out of thin air. Amos was at a loss for words for a while. When he was about to retort, Evelyn shot him a dirty look, forcing him to swallow his words. I trust them. She sighed. It's just like Alan to do this. The most important thing now is his funeral. We can't let him rot in the wilds. His body's still there. Alan had turned back to his human form after the decapitation. I'll take you guys there later. But he wanted you guys to burn his body right there and collect his remains. Spread his ashes in the Nui if you ever travel to Rivendell. His wife was sent off the same way. The troop members were surprised to hear that. Alan wouldn't tell that to anyone, Evelyn decided. So now we know they aren't lying. Thanks for understanding. Roy sighed. Alan's been suffering from the curse for a long time now. He wanted to see Sheena again, but he held on for the kids. The troop stayed around for a couple of days to retrieve Alan's remains. They burned his body with normal fire and Letho's Igni for a long time, but eventually, they managed to turn Alan's remains into bones and ash. They collected everything. The caravan's mood was gloomy as everyone mourned for their late captain for a while. Many of the members were tearing up too. Right. Alan's probably reunited with his wife in Melitel's kingdom now. First things first. What should we do about Art and Ari? We take care of them, of course. Cantilla thumped her chest. And we need a new captain as soon as possible. Preferably someone charismatic. Amos quickly voiced his opinion, only getting everyone's glares in return. He shut up. Alan said he wanted Evelyn to take his place. Everyone was surprised to hear that from Roy, but most of them accepted it. Not Amos though, but a single vote was useless. Collins was huddling with Faraz as usual. Faraz took a deep breath and put his hands together to plead. So Collins and I have been dating for years, but we can't have any children of our own, and I'm sure you guys know why. We've been thinking about that for a long time. Then his face was flushed with excitement. Alan treated us like family, and we're grateful for him. We've always wanted to repay our debt, but we never had the chance. Until now. If it's fine with everyone, we'd like to adopt the kids as thanks to Alan's help. And we'll take care of them like they're our kids. In a way, they're our dream come true. Yeah. Collins quickly backed his lover up. Please, everyone. They held their hands together and bowed to everyone deeply for the longest time. Everyone was taken by surprise. They never thought the gay couple was any different from other couples, but instinctively, they thought Faraz and Collins were different from a heterosexual couple. They couldn't let them adopt Alan's kids. And so, the members were in a dilemma. Evelyn and Amos wanted to refuse, but they didn't want to hurt them. Roy kept quiet for a while before stepping in. Ari and Art are special, in a sense. Not anyone can adopt them. They've been living as a falcon and an owl for 5 years, so they operate differently from normal humans. Owls are nocturnal creatures who can get really active at night. They feed on frogs, insects, and other small creatures. On the other hand, falcons love to dive from high up in the air. Can you even imagine how Art would act? And besides, Alan wanted them to get adopted by the Temple of Melitel in Elander. It's a good place filled with kind, gentle souls. Join our Discord to chat about the series and get notified when a new chapter gets released. Chapter 95. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Reaper Scans Chapter 95. Elander, TL. Osaka, Art, stop. Evelyn massaged her temples, but that didn't cheer her up at all. Faraz was trying to catch him, but Art kept dodging him. Still thinking he had wings, he ran around the caravan like a wild rooster, flapping his arms, hunching his back, craning his neck, lifting his butt. The boy ran ahead like a falcon, trying to fly, but he couldn't. He babbled as he flapped his arms, trying to speak, but his tongue kept getting twisted, much to Evelyn's worry. She wondered if he'd bite it off. He's cheeky. Everyone else watched with great interest. They were both sad and amused, since Art reminded them of Alan's death, but at the same time, Art brought some life to the troop. That's better than being depressed. Roy was glad Art was cheeky. Keep Alan's death a secret until they're older. Ari's even more troublesome. Roy was reminded of a hilarious scene in the carriage. Ari thought she was still an owl, so she wanted to perch on the wooden club, but since she turned back into a human, she fell face first into the ground and got a bruise. Ari kept crying, but then she seemed to remember her missing father and stopped making any sounds altogether. But the biggest problem was the children having a limited vocabulary. They couldn't talk in any human tongue either, and they were psychologically worse off than their peers. They were only sensitive to friendliness and mockery. I hope they get better soon. They arrived in a city in Elander's vicinity 1 week after that. The sky was overcast. Then they went west, eventually reaching the city of Elander. The great city was situated south of the Valley of Pontar, which was on Mahakam's west. The Valley of Pontar was also the intersection point of Temeria, Redania, Edirne, and Kedwen, the 4 biggest kingdoms in the north. It was one of the most important military strips in the north. As the people would say, he who controls the Valley of Pontar controls the north. That was how important the valley was. Thanks to it being on the way to the valley, Elander enjoyed prosperity. Not only was it a military base, it was also a business hub. Of course, Novigrad remained the biggest city, housing 30,000 citizens, but Elander boasted 10,000 residents in its city. Thanks to that, business opportunities bloomed. Elander's merchants set up a merchants' association in the city, taking their unique merchandise to sell in the city. Because of that, organizations like the Architects Association and Blacksmiths Association opened shop in Elander, and their business boomed. On top of that, Vizima, the capital of Temeria, was not that far away either, making transport convenient. There was a long line in front of the gates since it was rush hour, but even so, the guards, who were armed to the teeth, checked everyone diligently. Roy told Evelyn to meet up at an inn later before leaving with Letho. It's been a while since your last trip to Elander, right? Roy explained, from what I know, they don't take well to witchers now. It was early 1261 at the moment. Roy remembered Geralt getting screwed over 7 years ago in the year 1254, right after he was dubbed the Butcher of Blaviken. The Order of the White Rose insulted him, calling him worthless, and then he was forced to enter a battle where he was prohibited from fighting back. Geralt had managed to stay alive in the end, but that angered the Order of the White Rose, and by extension, Hereward, the noble who took pride in the Knight Order. Even the Temerian Royal Council had complaints about him. Roy thought Geralt's actions would cause trouble for Letho if someone found out he was a witcher. Letho shrugged dismissively. Been 20 years, but I never heard any kingdoms banning witchers from passing through. Every city has its own share of monster issues. Where there are monsters, there are requests. They won't say no to us. Letho was calm but firm. And we have to replenish our alchemy stock. I see. Let's see if we can get in without getting checked. Roy looked ahead and saw the Temple of Melitel. It was near the mountain outside the city. He'd go right there once they settled in the city. The duo didn't disguise themselves too much. Roy covered his hair and ears with a white towel, while Letho wore some shabby clothes instead of his witcher attire. He didn't even show his school's emblem, his sword, or his potions. If Roy didn't know better, he'd think Letho was just a brawny farmer trying to get into a city. But things didn't go well for them. Roy managed to slip past the guards, but the guard said coldly, "Raise your head." Roy froze up for a moment before looking back, but he realized the guard was glaring at Letho. He was holding his sword, ready to strike at any time. The guards at the entrance surrounded them, watching with great interest. The air turned heavy, and a deafening silence surrounded them. Even the travelers stopped to see what the fuss was all about. "Yeah, I'm talking to you, big guy. Raise your head." Letho's lips curled into a cruel smile, but only for a moment. He loosened his fists and sighed ever so audibly before looking up. Roy felt sad for him. No matter how powerful a Witcher was, they had to bow before overwhelming numbers. "Oh, we got a Witcher here." The guard holding a spear opened his face armor, smirking at Letho. "Never seen one so shabby before. Thought you could change the color of your eyes just because you're in peasant attire. Did your brain get fried during your mutation, freak?" He looked at his colleagues before bursting out in laughter. The guards were smaller in size compared to Letho, but they laughed at him as if he were nothing more than a beggar. Letho took their insults until they were done laughing. "Right, back to business. Trying to slip in, weren't you?" "Slip in?" Letho frowned. "You guys screened me, didn't you?" "What? Elander not welcoming Witchers?" "No, but someone is interested in you. You'll have to see him first." "Is this Elander's law? Does everyone have to see him before they can enter?" "No, this is an order. Bors, take the Witcher to the waiting room. Dawn, call Tylers over here. Tell the knight the one he's obsessed about is here. Wait." Roy came to Letho's side, much to the guard's surprise. Then he took a deep breath. "I'm with him, that I knew it. I knew something was up." The guard gave Letho a mocking look. "Witchers doing what they do best, kidnapping children." "No. I'm his disciple, and I'll be a Witcher too sometime in the future. Join our Discord to chat about the series and get notified when a new chapter gets released." Chapter 96. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Reaper Scans Chapter 96. Order of the White Rose, TL. Osaka, PR, Ash, the people won't take to us kindly, boy, Letho reminded. But don't flip them off. We're on their turf, after all. Yeah, I know. I'm not an idiot, Roy grumbled. When in Temeria, do as the Temerians do. Good. Letho nodded. But if they get on your nerves, try to see them as dogs. Letho gave weird advice. Every time they bark at you, throw them a bone or something. Not literal ones, of course, but you know what I mean. They'll wag their tails once their ego is satisfied, especially those knights. I see. Roy shot him a look of surprise. He never expected a straight man like Letho to come up with such a quirky idea. A short while later, a pair of knights came to the clearing near the gates, where the duo was waiting. Letho and Roy bowed and observed them. The one on the left was in white armor and wore a red cape, a white rose engraved on his left shoulder piece. Every step he took made his armor creak. He was young, but he had a scar running down from his forehead to his nose. He could have been a handsome man, but instead he looked sinister. The knight's gaze was set on Letho, but there was only rage within him. Standing beside him was a short and sturdy dwarf who was wearing a jacket made of fox pelts and chainmail armor. He was looking at the duo sternly with his arms crossed. Shit, Roy cursed silently. Damn you, Murphy's Law. He knew the scarred man was the same knight Geralt had defeated, and judging by the look on his face, he was a tough one to handle. State your name, Witcher. And that goes for your companion too, the scarred knight ordered them imperiously. We're only nameless peasants, noble knights. Our names are nothing but an insult to you. Letho bowed humbly, but he was scanning his surroundings for any high ground he could take. At the same time, the spearmen around the gates were watching them closely. The scarred knight's face fell, and he went closer to the duo. When he was only 10 feet away from them, he looked up arrogantly, not unlike a swan that was craning its neck. "I am Arthur Tales, firstborn of the Tales family, knight of the 4th Corps of the Order of the White Rose, and a loyal servant of King Hereward. Witcher, now that I have stated my name, I demand the same from you. Any defiance will be seen as an insult to the order." Roy arched his eyebrow. Still as arrogant as ever. Left with no choice, Letho answered, "I'm Letho, a witcher from the school of the Viper. This is my disciple, Roy. How can you prove it? Where's your crest? And why are you trying to get into Elander City?" Tales asked a lot of questions, and his hand was already on his blade. If Letho showed even an ounce of hesitation, he would cut him down. His teammate's lip twitched, and the dwarf took a deep breath. "I think you know why we're trying to get into Elander. We got into a few fights before this and wrecked our equipment. Most of our supplies are gone, so we need to restock in the city. And my leg's lame too. Here's my insignia. Please show mercy to us, sir. Let us pass through Elander L.RG.I.C." Arthur looked at the necklace and nodded. When he confirmed that Letho was unarmed and lame, his eyes gleamed. "Letho from the Viper School, I, Arthur Tales, from the Order of the White Rose, challenge you to a duel." He unsheathed his sword and held it with both hands, pointing it at Letho. "But Mr. Tales, you're a noble knight. Don't you think it's too much of an honor for me? I'm just a witcher. Not even a knight. I don't think I'm worthy of this." "Yes," Roy added. "We're not worthy of the honor of a knight's duel," he scorned himself. Tales stopped them. "We have a creed here. If you were the ones challenging me, then I'd have the right to refuse, but since I'm challenging you, you must accept, or you're nothing but a piece of worthless trash. I see you as my equal, but of course, it is just temporary." Roy was shocked by the ridiculous declaration. Crazy arrogant bastard. That's quite the logical explanation you got there. I guess you must be a fan of philosophy too. The highest stat he has is 7. Damn, he's stupid. I could probably take him down if it weren't a duel of swords. If he doesn't wear his armor, of course. The sarcasm flew past Tails' head, and Letho asked, "What will happen if I refuse, then? Aside from being seen as trash. Then you must leave Elander. Our city doesn't welcome cowards." The dwarf chuckled. "Ah, shut up," he said gruffly. "You're a knight. Remember the creed. This is just shameful." "No, you shut up, Cranmer." Tails' face was flushed. "This is personal. I must defeat a witcher to regain my honor. I don't mind you tagging along, but if you're butting in, then I'm smashing your head in. Try me." "I ain't letting you do whatever you want," the dwarf retorted. Arthur gnashed his teeth. "Go back to your troops or I'm telling on you." "Cranmer. Dennis Cranmer." Roy's eyes gleamed. Cranmer's a dwarf with a sense of justice and equality. He's going to join the army of the Mahakams in the Second War to resist Nilfgaard's invasion. This guy's important to Mount Carbon. I think I'll take this." "Dennis Cranmer. Are you the Dennis Cranmer?" Roy went up and feigned surprise. "You know me." Dennis looked at him with doubt. "Reagan told me about you back in Mount Carbon." "Reagan. Reagan Dahlberg." Dennis rubbed his nose for a while, and then he remembered who Reagan was. "Oh, that boy's all grown up now, huh? He was still a snotty little dwarf 30 years back. So, is he doing fine? As a dwarf, I mean. He's a master crossbowman now. And a reigning champion, too. I see he's even more of a troublemaker than his brother is." Dennis gave him a friendly look. "So how do you know him?" I learned how to shoot from him for a bit. Roy stared down awkwardly. But I'm stupid, so I didn't get a lot of his teachings. Dennis was excited to see someone who just came from his hometown, so he talked with Roy about Mount Carbon, leaving Arthur alone. Roy made a new friend out of him after they talked. He even spoke about the time he and Letho took out the Les Hen and the Neckers in the tunnels, effectively helping the dwarves. The dwarf patted his shoulder. Ah, I see. Now that you're my friend, he turned around to Arthur. This is no longer personal. Roy's a part of my family now, so his mentor is my friend. You are forbidden from venting your anger on them. Tails glowered at Dennis. How dare you, Dennis Cranmer? Ah, shut up. Dennis snorted. Count Falwick's not even here. You have no one to rely on, and dwarves always stand up for their friends. You want to get them? Then face me first. Or you can tell King Hereward about this. Let him decide. Arthur's veins popped, but he couldn't do anything. He glared at the three of them and threatened, just you wait. You'd better not pull anything in the city, or I'll rip a new one. You'd better not harass them, Tails, or you're getting it. After Arthur was gone, Dennis turned to the duo. Don't worry, you two. That bastard gets on everybody's nerves. He ruined his reputation himself. If you run into any trouble, come to the castle and tell them I sent you. I'll help you out. Thank you for your help. Roy bowed sincerely. Ah, what are friends for? Let's drink when we have the time. Not good to let the guests go without some wine. I'll take one request for free, Letho offered. Elander does have its own share of problems, but most of them aren't really big. Dennis smiled. It's fine, Letho, but I'll take you up on the offer. Join our Discord to chat about the series and get notified when a new chapter gets released. Chapter 97. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Reaper Scans Chapter 97. Temporary Goodbye, TL. Osaka, PR, Ash, Cranmer left them shortly after that. The duo went along the main path leading into the city, where buildings were crammed together. The sellers were hollering at everyone who went past, trying to get their attention. Magic salve. Get your magic salve here. Cures everything from patches to scabies. You won't get it elsewhere. Look here. I got some talismans and pills. Get one today and regain your youth. And look at this. Hallucinative potion. One gulp and you'll know what ecstasy is like. Some swear this even gives the dead a boner. Got a mice infestation. You came to the right place, folks. Look at this cat. It's cute, cuddly, and catches mice faster than you can say meow. And it's a great companion too. Perfect for the family. Hey, you look like you need a tooth extraction. I bet that toothache is driving you nuts. Then step right up. I offer painless tooth extraction, and at a low cost too. How low can you do? Roy asked the dentist. He wondered how a dentist could work with a chair, a bottle of wine, and some rope. 10 copper an hour. The lean dentist grinned toothily at him, but his teeth were black. The duo rendezvoused with the troupe after leaving the shady street, and they hired a guide to show them the way around town. Finally, the group settled in a remote inn called Potbelly. The inn's lobby was mostly taken up by the troupe, much to the innkeeper's delight. On the other hand, Evelyn was twirling her hair, looking troubled. Living in the city costs a lot. The accommodation fees ate up most of the money Alan left us. We can't go on like this. Cantilla, take some guys with you to survey the plaza and the crowded spots in the city. See if you can get us a spot to perform. Cantilla put her legs on the table languidly. Sure, boss. Everyone else can take the day off. It's been a tiring journey. The troupe members went to do their own stuff. Some played Gwent, some kept drinking, and some went upstairs to have some fun. So what next, Roy? Are you leaving with Letho? Evelyn gave Roy a gentle look, as if saying she wanted him to stay. Roy nodded stiffly. I've been traveling for years. Just when I finally got a friend, you're already leaving. She pulled him closer, almost kissing him. Witchers live a dangerous life. Why don't you stay with me in the troop? You won't mind, will you, Letho? After all, you have a lot of disciples, right? She grinned cheekily at Letho. L.RG, Roy almost lost himself when she hugged him, but only for a moment. His will was getting stronger by the day, after all. Even so, he had to put on a show. I don't want to say goodbye either, Evelyn, and then he felt her pushing his head against her chest. Oh, so this is how a woman's chest feels like. Feels like a dream. He was almost suffocating from the soft, bouncy breasts that enveloped his face. All he could smell was the intoxicating fragrance from Evelyn. Letho crossed his arms, watching the shenanigan unfold. Then he smiled sarcastically. I'll respect your choice, Roy. He'd given his permission, though Roy knew that wasn't the case. You can pursue a career as a circus performer. I won't force you. He emphasized the last sentence. Roy could imagine Letho hunting him down if he took Evelyn's offer, and he shivered. I'd like a girlfriend, but not now. Not yet. He shot up and cleared his mind. Thank you, Evelyn. He held her hand. But Letho's probably gonna get himself eaten by wild beasts without my help, so, I see. Take care, then. Evelyn sighed and stared down in silence. Are the kids still asleep? Roy shifted the topic awkwardly. The troop members had been trying to work with Ari and Art over the last couple of days, but that messed up their biological clock, so they could fall asleep at any given moment. Evelyn composed herself, but it was obvious she still wanted Roy to stay. We have to find them a home. The troop can't take care of them forever, since we wander the world. Alan said the Temple of Melatel was a good place. But I'd like to see if there's anything better. I want real professionals. Oh, and I might run into you there. Hey, Letho. Is it me, or has Evelyn been acting weird around me? Letho rubbed his chin and realized something incredible. Whoa, you're saying you don't get it. You're usually the smart aleck, so what happened? Taken up by your lust for a woman's body. Alright, stop joking. Roy clenched his fist, as if threatening to crush Letho's hand. I just refused a woman all for you, you know. Yes, you weren't imagining it. Evelyn was trying to mate with you. Letho nodded. Elves aren't exactly a fertile race, unlike humans, who breed like rabbits. To make things worse, they're only fertile at certain ages. You're a young part.elf, and she's already of marrying age. Elves were elegant and enjoyed a long lifespan, but they were also open about sex. Roy had heard stories about how elves would fuck their comrades as much as possible before they died to keep the fear of death at bay. But I'm a minor. Not exactly. You're a part.elf, so you grow almost at the same rate as humans do. You're gonna be mature in a few years. Not to mention you can live a long life, and your looks are acceptable for them. Letho gave Roy a look that sent a chill down the boy's spine. Evelyn's a beautiful, gentle, and sexy woman. You sure you don't want to stay with her? Roy was reminded of the feeling of Evelyn's gigantic breasts, but he quickly stopped himself from thinking about it. His body had changed ever since he ingested the child of the sun, as if he were giving in to his primal urges. Forget it. I prefer monster killing. Wipe your drool away. Letho stood up with the help of his crutch. Time to sell off the stuff in your pocket and restock some alchemy supplies. Then, we're going to the temple. Join our Discord to chat about the series and get notified when a new chapter gets released. Chapter 98. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Reaper Scans Chapter 98. Alchemy, TL. Osaka, PR Ash, Roy got a lot of materials in his inventory space after the battles in Smyak. There were hundreds of Necker eyes, tongues, ears, innards, and all sorts of organs. They were going to sell everything off aside from the green mutagens, the fangs, and the claws. They had to make the potion for the trial and some bolts for Roy. The parts would net them some money and free up some space. As to Miria's duchy, Elander was filled with all kinds of merchants selling every item under the sun. Of course, there were also those who'd buy monster parts, though the price could vary. If the merchant knew the seller was an amateur, they'd lowball them, but Letho was no amateur. He had lived for 80 years and knew much about the market. His strategy was simple. Name his price to the buyer and stare at them in silence for a few moments. Some of the buyers would make a better offer after getting stared at for a short while, and about 30 seconds later, they'd give him the offer he wanted. Letho's sharp gaze, intimidating build, and scary look were enough to scare the buyers into submission. After selling the parts to 3 buyers, they managed to make 200 crowns, but then they spent the money on their alchemy supplies. The duo had a hard time after consuming all their items in the tunnels, so the first order of business after getting out was to restock, and it was a big restock. They got a lot of items, including Belize fruits, arenaria, celandine, and a lot of herbs. They also got sulfur, phosphorus, and saltpeter to make bombs. There was also Mahakaman liquor, kirsch, and fiorano in Roy's inventory space. Then they went to an established blacksmith in the city to make bolts for Roy. Each cost 20 coppers, and Roy made 100 of them. The bolts had more penetrative power than normal ones, and they were also heavier. The tip had some Necker venom on it so it could kill better. Letho needed to sharpen his sword and short sword, which also cost them. Gwhyr didn't dull, even though it had gone through a few battles, thanks to the gnome's craftsmanship. It could still slice even the thinnest hair easily, and all Letho had to do was maintain it with grease. Also, the duo wouldn't let a stranger get a hold on the sword. Finally, Letho went to a clothes shop to make 2 sets of gray leather armor and pairs of long boots. Wearing shabby clothes made it hard for him to move, and they offered no protection. The armor was not cheap. Then came sundown, and the whole city basked in its golden light. Roy went through the bills after their purchase and was shocked by how much they'd spent. It was all the money from their sales and they'd had to pay quite a lot from their own pockets. Whoa! Witchers may make a lot of coins, but it's a risky job, and it takes a lot out of their pockets. They only had around 100 crowns left. Even without spending on drinks and women, finances were tight. I think we should take some requests, Letho. We need crowns. Roy stared at Letho expectantly. If he managed to kill one more type of monster, all he had to do was pass the trial, and he'd become a rookie witcher. He had never taken any request from the bulletin board ever since he'd followed Letho, but he wanted to. It was a rite of passage for a witcher. Not at the moment. Letho gave him a piercing look. Haven't you had enough in Smyak? It's time to rest. You're going to help me with some alchemy work, he commanded. Once we are set with the potion, we'll be heading to the temple. Letho rented a place with a kitchen so he could change it into a lab, just like how he did in Aldersburg. The only difference was he had Roy to help, so they spent half a day turning the kitchen into a makeshift lab. Roy noticed the familiar cauldron, mortar, alembic, bellows, and pestle from those days in Aldersburg, and he almost fainted. He could see himself toiling over the making of potions and bombs from day to night again. But he had an inexplicable desire for it. He wanted to feel a sense of accomplishment when he managed to make that one potion after thousands of tries. Thus, he took the cauldron and mortar and started his. All right, you're starting with the marigold potion, Letho interrupted him. Tell me the recipe and the steps. 2 ounces of dried marigold, 1 ounce of nettle, and mix them together in the mortar, Roy blurted, since he could never forget the recipe. It felt like it was seared into his soul. Not bad. It's been a month, but you still remember it. Letho gave him a look of approval. Now for the potion making. Let's see if it's as good as your theory. Roy moved by reflex, as if he were a master alchemist. He put a sack of marigold and nettle on the right surface before weighing them, then put them into the mortar and crushed them with the pestle. 15 minutes later, the liquid in the cauldron was starting to simmer, a faint fragrance wafting across the lab. Roy quickly killed the heat and poured the potion into a glass container. His grip was firm, and not even a drop of potion went to waste. Finally, he corked it. Letho swirled the potion. Have you been practicing? He was surprised. You haven't been doing this for a month, but you improved. Probably because of the Child of the Sun, Roy said. I can control my body better now. Having one more point in dexterity certainly helped Roy. This is a surprise. Well, you're done with marigold potions now. Let's move on to the next one. Letho paused for a moment. It's a kind of poison. We used it in Smyak. Oh, the paralyzing one. Yes, but not the same thing we used. This is the full version. It's harder to do. One dose is all it takes to paralyze someone entirely. It's hell for them, Noel.N. Roy's eyes shone. He'd wanted to make one ever since he'd used it in the tunnels. The paralyzing poison would be a more useful tool than oils or bombs in certain scenarios, but then Letho stopped his thoughts. You'll have to promise you'll only use this as a last resort, no matter what. Effective immediately. Can you do that? What are you trying to say? Don't use this on the innocent. Letho was reminded of his school's dark past. The school went down the wrong path for a very long time. We emphasized on poisons more than potions, and we took assassination requests just like the cat school witchers. But we were worse. So much worse than they were. Because of that, our reputation took a hit. Letho paused. We'd ask every disciple to take in a pet and make them kill it before the training ended so they'd grow indifferent. Roy was shocked, since Letho never asked him to do that, nor did he expect the school to have such a dark past. At the same time, he was glad he was born at the right time. He wasn't necessarily a kind person, but he wouldn't kill needlessly either. So you also, yes, and obviously that was wrong. It sped up the school's death. Letho was solemn. It's hard to stop once you start abusing your power. Eventually, you're going to lose yourself to it. If you were to turn out like that, I'd take you back to the school for re-education. He emphasized re-education. Roy's heart skipped a beat. Very well, then. I swear on my name as a Witcher of the Viper School to only use poison as a last resort. Roy had made another promise. But Roy remembered what Letho ended up doing, so he looked at him. What if you need to use this to revive the school? Will you do it? It depends on who the target is, Letho answered after a short while of silence. What if it's the king? What's the matter with you? Letho refused to answer. That's it for assassination talk. Alright, let's get on with it. Remember the simplified version's recipe. Crush the comfrey, extract the longgrub's juice, cut up the wolfsbane. Roy spent most of his time over the next few days making the poison, resting only for meals and meditation. Thanks to his experience with the marigold potion, he finally managed to make one dose of poison on the third day after dozens of failures. And then his character sheet shook. A new skill was born. Alchemy Level 1. A crafting skill that allows you to make oils, potions, decoctions, poisons, and bombs. Rank. Beginner Alchemist. You now possess the skills to make Marigold Potion, Paralyzing Poison. Roy was excited to see that, since he finally saw the fruits of his labor. Is this the only poison we can make, Letho? Or are there more? Yes, but not now. First, make 5 doses of paralyzing poison and 5 marigold potions. Keep them in your pocket. And help me with the decoctions and bombs. Join our Discord to chat about the series and get notified when a new chapter gets released. Chapter 99. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Reaper Scans Chapter 99. Taking the request, TL. Osaka, PR, Ash. Roy was checking the items on the table, the light in the lab illuminating his face. 2 dancing stars. Roy held 2 green glass containers and tossed them into the air. When they came down, he grabbed them and opened his palms, then the canisters were gone. He turned to the blue bottle with yellow bands tied around it. 1 dimeritium bomb. Didn't have enough dimeritium. He pointed at the bomb, then it disappeared, just like the dancing stars. 2 dragon's dream, 2 swallows, 5 doses of paralyzing poison, and 5 marigold potions. He brushed his hand across the crystal clear potions and 5 yellow potions. Everything is accounted for. Roy looked at Letho, who was meditating, and smiled. It took them a week of non-stop work, but they'd finally restocked their item supply. During that time, they'd gone to take the crossbow bolts and Letho's sword at the smithy, then they'd taken the leather armor sets from the clothes shop, though they were shabbier than Roy had thought. And then all that was left was the trial. Letho stopped meditating, though he had a concerned look on his face. "All right, leave me alone now, boy. I'll be staying here for a few days to process the ingredients for the decoction. Do not disturb me. Take a stroll around Elander." Roy heaved a sigh of relief, though he was curious about the potion. He wouldn't push his luck though, since he was on the verge of breaking down. "I can assist you, though." "Not at your level," Letho refused. "And this is important. We can't afford any mistakes, or the potion's going to end up killing you." The news shocked Roy. "So why do I have to wait until we get to the temple then?" "That's where you're wrong," Letho answered. "You're taking the potion the moment it's done. Like I said, I'm just processing the ingredients. I'm not cooking it up yet." He paused for a moment. "I left that part out for a reason. The head priestess has a greenhouse, and I need some of the herbs there. Also, their lab is better than whatever we have here. You'll need her help for the trial too. She's a sorceress, what if she refuses you?" "She owes me one, and I have an ace up my sleeve," Letho replied. "She will help out." "All right. Take your potion of the week and get out. Come back in 3 days." Roy exited the lab wearing a black leather armor set, and he was sweating. Elander was a bustling city. The sun was shining warmly, and the people were frolicking around the streets. Compared to the people in villages and small towns, Elander citizens had a better fashion sense. Instead of the usual gray and black, the people wore colorful clothes and stylish accessories, like hats, necklaces, rings, belts, and brooches. Roy took a deep breath and stretched himself. That hits the spot. He would have liked to have gone to an inn for some Gwent, but he had a more pressing matter at hand. Since he was alone for the time being, he wanted to accept a request all by himself, but not long after he'd gotten out to the streets, a temptress beckoned him. She had heavy makeup, a luscious smile, and her hair tumbled down her shoulders. Roy looked at her, but he turned away and left after a moment. Young ladies would braid their hair, married women would cover themselves with a hat or a headscarf, while noble ladies would perm their hair. Warriors, on the other hand, would cut it short. The only women who'd let their hair stay the way it was were druids and prostitutes. It was a show of freedom and independence. The woman who was trying to seduce Roy was the latter, but Roy didn't give in. He didn't want to get into a bad habit. Roy eventually arrived at the bulletin board in the city center, but it was dusty and filled with cobwebs. He thought he could get some great requests, but reality was often disappointing. "What the heck is this? They want me to find their missing cat." He shook his head in disgust. "I'm not a firefighter. I don't have time for this. This woman wants me to catch her cheating husband in the act." Roy mocked, an eye for an eye, then. Just start an affair yourself. He looked at another request and balked. And this wants a caretaker for a paralyzed lady. Nope, sorry. I'm not a caretaker. Oh, this one's interesting. Roy looked at the lower right, where a new request was posted. A missing boy, huh? He finally got serious. The request read, "Look ye. This is an emergency. Help needed. Bounty hunters, witchers, or whoever you are, I shall pay you 150 crowns for this job. My son, Burchell, went missing after he went to fish at a river outside the city. If anyone wants to help, come to the bakery in Eastern Elander. For experienced people only. Amateurs back off." The kid went missing in a rural area when he was fishing. Roy rubbed his chin, pondering the case. That doesn't narrow it down much. Could have been human traffickers or something, but this is promising. I'll look into this. The bakery was sweltering, but Huckle didn't care. He was neatly putting dough and more dough into the elliptical oven. Huckle had been working as a baker for 20 years, and at least a third of the citizens were his customers. Baking used to be the thing he liked to do the most. It was gratifying to see raw dough turn into brown, fluffy bread. Every time he saw them come out perfectly, it brought a smile to his face. But no longer. He had been gloomy over the last couple of days. He liked bread, but his son was more important. Every time he thought of his missing son, he would start to shake, and an urge to cry would seize him. Huckle knew what every missing person in Elander would end up as. A corpse, or a chewed-out corpse. Not many came back alive. I'll keep looking after this. Hello. Might you be Huckle the baker? Someone called out, snapping him out of his nightmare. Huckle composed himself and took his mittens off. Yes, but the kitchen is off limits. Go to the storefront for the bread. You won't find a better offer. 20 crowns is all you need for one satisfying loaf of bread. It's all dough and nothing else. No sawdust, no clay, no potash. He reflexively promoted his bread. I also accept payment in terms of flour. Any type of flour. I'll keep some, but you'll get most of it back as bread. Sorry, but I'm not a customer. Roy put on a smile. He noticed the baker's bloodshot eyes, and the fact he was wearing nothing but thin clothes. Mr. Huckle, I'm Roy, a witcher. I came for the request you put up. Can you tell me what happened? Huckle froze for a moment, then he sized Roy up. Crude leather armor and long boots, trimmed hair, nice nose, good eyes. Good looking, approachable, muscular, and tall. But his skin is smooth, and he looks like a kid. He's probably not even 15. Huckle waved him down. You're pulling my leg, boy. I need an experienced one, not a kid like you. And I'm not taking any disciples now. I don't need any help around the shop. Roy slammed his weapons on the baker's workstation, much to Huckle's shock. The sight of the crossbow and the steel sword made the baker retreat, then he picked up his baking implement. Calm down. You would have been dead if I wanted to rob you. I'll let you in on a secret. Roy wanted that effect. Then he kept on lying, I'm a part elf, so I look younger than I am. I'm of age now, and I've taken on my fair share of requests. He showed Huckle his ears. The moment Huckle took a look, Roy hid his ears again. Your son's disappearance smells fishy, doesn't it? He asked seriously. That's why you need an experienced witcher. The earlier he's found, the higher the chances of survival. If you give up now, it might be a month before the next witcher comes around. The baker finally wavered, since Roy was right. He was running out of time. I'm not here for the deposit. Just tell me what I want to know. Roy raised his head confidently and went closer to Huckle. You can keep the money if I fail to find your son. The baker finally stopped frowning. No harm in telling him. I lose nothing, and I get a free helper. Huckle took a deep breath before leading him to the storefront. He took off his hat, revealing his unkempt hair underneath. Then, he sat down. Want some bread, Roy? Fresh out the oven. I had something to eat just now, so thanks for the offer. Let's talk business. Roy crossed his arms sternly as he tried to put on airs. Your eyes are different from the other witchers, though. Everyone says witchers have the eyes of a beast, but your eyes look the same as mine. Because I'm a part-elf. All the witchers you've seen used to be human, Roy answered forcefully, staring at Huckle. Now talk. Huckle wiped the sweat off his face. Very well, then. Deciding to trust Roy for the time being, he said, My son, Burchell, just turned 18 this year. Yes, you said that in the request. When and where did he go missing? 7th of December. That was 2 days ago. Burchell went fishing at Wigan outside Southern Elander at 1 in the afternoon. It had been his usual hunt. He goes there once every fortnight and spends most of the day there. Fishing's his only hobby. He lives with me and is still single, so he has nowhere else to go, Huckle bemoaned. Burchell always comes home before 7, but he didn't come back that day, even after 9. Huckle slammed the chair with his fist. I knew something was wrong. He looked fearful. Elander's curfew starts at 9. Or maybe he stayed the night at his friend's place, Roy speculated. He's 18. He's come of age. It's normal to stay the night somewhere else. I asked his friends, but none of them saw him. Huckle looked worried. I even bribed the patrol so they'd help me. They told me they saw him going out that day, but he never came back. Elander receives a lot of people every day, so maybe the guards missed him. No, Huckle denied it. I have proof. I saw his fishing rod at the riverside. There's a red cloth on it. It's empty, his beloved rod. He's been using it for 10 years. That's the only thing I found. Roy asked, Did you find anything else? Blood, handkerchief, or anything that he brings with him? I got some old timers to look around last night, but we got nothing. Huckle was getting frustrated. That's why I posted that request. Have you ever run into something similar, Roy? Huckle was going to panic. He wanted to use an honorary title for Roy, but he was too young for Huckle to do so. Do you think my son is still alive? I can't be sure about that, since I don't have enough information for now, Roy answered calmly. What about the knights? They should be responsible for you guys, no? Huckle spat indignantly. The order is only loyal to the king. Their job is to protect the king and his family, not peasants like us. They put me on the waiting list. Said they'd only help after they're done with the problems in the city. Huckle had beef with the knights. The bread would have gone moldy by then. My poor Burchell's going to end up dead, or worse. Huckle shivered. The thought of his son being dead tortured him. I see. That's how nobles are. Roy shared Huckle's sentiment, since he felt disgust toward Tails. He tapped the chair's armrest and asked, Does Burchell have any enemies? Huckle denied it fervently. Impossible. He spends most of his time in the bakery with me. All he does is help out with the mice problem and housekeeping. He never complains and is always happy. There's no way he'd have beef with anyone. I'd know if he got into trouble with someone in the city. Even if he did have an enemy that I didn't know about, there'd be no reason for them to kill him. Very well. Let's assume he went missing at the riverbank, then. Roy stood up and strapped his weapons to his back. Let's take a look at the crime scene. Join our Discord to chat about the series and get notified when a new chapter gets released. Chapter 100. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Reaper Scans Chapter 100. Investigation, TL. Osaka, PR. Ash, Roy and Huckle went to Wigan, south of Elander. The boy hunkered down on a gigantic boulder jutting out on the riverbank and brushed his finger across a pebble. He looked at the gleaming river before shifting his gaze toward the rustling bamboo forest standing on the other side. Wigan flowed toward the south, merging with Ismena after the sewers ahead. To the north, Wigan merged with Pontar. The river was less than 20 feet wide and gleamed green because of the algae and microorganisms in it. Roy couldn't even see the bottom. "Do you see anything, Roy?" Huckle was wearing some shabby clothes. He was holding a rickety fishing rod, looking nervous. "Any clues?" "Calm down. We just got here. I need more time." Roy dusted his hands off and looked around. "This is the boulder Burchell sat on whenever he fished here." "Yes." Huckle nodded. "I came with him many times, and he never changed spots. Burchell's an honest kid, so he doesn't change once he's made a decision." "Did you also find empty on this boulder, then?" "Yes." Huckle stabbed the fishing rod into a hole below the boulder. "It was an easy spot to fish. I found it right here." Roy could imagine Burchell enjoying the breeze on the boulder as he fished before disaster had struck. "Let's search the place." "But my friends and I did that yesterday, and we found nothing." Huckle shook his head. "It's useless. If you want to save your son, then you'll do as I say," Roy commanded. "If you find any scales, I want you to give them to me." "Scales?" Huckle was confused. "I need you to look for my son, not fish. If you're craving fish, I can give you one for free. Grilled, stewed, doesn't matter. Heck, I'll even throw in a loaf of bread." "You know nothing." Roy shook his head. He didn't want to tell Huckle what he had in mind, but he had no choice. "Drowners have scales too, but it's different. Their scales are harder and heavier than any fish's scales, and there's a protrusion in the middle of it. Also, you can smell the stench of rotting flesh if you see one." Huckle paled. Everyone who lived near a river knew there could be drowners lurking in the waters. If anyone were to be attacked by them, their chances of survival were slim. Huckle didn't want to believe it, so he retorted, "But Burchell's been fishing for 8 years. There's no drowner here. Everything's changing. There might not have been any drowners in the past, but there are no guarantees now. Your son might be torn apart as we speak." "Oh no. I'll search the place." Only humans or drowners could have taken someone away at a riverbank. If they could find any traces or the scales of drowners, then Burchell was probably taken by drowners. Roy was no longer the weakling he'd been. He had dancing stars and dragon's dreams in his inventory, as well as a crossbow that could fire in quick succession. He could take the drowners on as long as they didn't gang up on him. However, he didn't get to fight them. After searching the riverbank for an hour, Roy found nothing. There were scales, but all of them belonged to the fish in the river. There were no drowners or any torn clothes in the river. Since monsters always left traces wherever they went, Roy was sure the river was free of drowners. On the other hand, Huckle heaved a sigh of relief. If there were no drowners around, that meant his son could still be alive. But if it's not monsters, then why did he go missing? "Did you find the rod here?" Roy gave it some thought. "That means he was taken away when he was fishing. There wasn't any cover at the riverbank, so ambushing Burchell on the rock was unlikely." Roy looked back at the dense bushes not far from them. It was a remote place, so if the culprit ambushed Burchell from the bushes, they could have covered their tracks and saved a lot of time. "Did you search the bushes yesterday?" "Yes." Huckle hesitated for a moment. "But not thoroughly, since I had to post the request this morning. I was going to come this afternoon." "I see." They spent half an hour going through every single bush. Thanks to his perception, Roy picked up a faint scent of urine from a shrub. "Ah, that's a clue. Huckle, does anyone else fish in this river? Any women who wash their clothes here?" No, as far as I'm concerned. Huckle shook his head. They live in the north, near the temple. The swamp is in the south, so nobody ever goes there. Only Burchell comes here, most of the time. So Burchell probably peed here. Or Huckle's friends. Roy looked in the direction of the scent and expanded his range. He parted every shrub with his hand and checked the ground. Thanks to his hard work, Roy finally found some dried blood an hour later. It seemed the blood had been splattered instead of bled out naturally. It was as if something caused it to spurt. He knew how the blood of neckers, drowners, less hens, and humans smelled like. Even though he wasn't as strong as a witcher, he was slightly confident that it was human blood. And probably spilled around 3 days ago or less. That's when Burchell vanished. This must be a clue. Did you find something, Roy? Huckle parted a shrub and hunkered down beside Roy. He looked to where the boy was touching and saw the blood, much to his shock. Blood, is my son dead. Calm down, Roy told him without even turning around. We don't know whose blood this is yet. But he was sure Burchell was attacked by something when he peed in the bush. That something was too fast for Burchell to defend against. Come with me. They followed the trail of the blood and noticed a blob of white that was cotton-like. Roy picked it up to take a whiff, but it was odorless. He pushed it together and pulled back, and the ball turned into sticky strings. This is mixed in with the blood. What is this, anyway? Roy had a feeling the ball of sticky item was a clue to what the culprit was. Is it a monster? Can't really remember which monster produces this. They kept following the trail of blood. Roy and Huckle noticed some dried blood after covering some distance. The trail led them deeper into the forest, and eventually, the trail became thinner and thinner. Finally, they stopped at a clearing in the far east of Elander, where shrubs grew wild. The faint scent of flowers wafted across the air, while turnips surrounded them. There wasn't anyone around, so the turnips weren't taken. Roy and Huckle looked ahead and noticed a deep hole in the field ahead of them. Join our Discord to chat about the series and get notified when a new chapter gets released.